Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we bring you a really focused exploration of the stories, the critical ones, shaping American democracy, justice, and civil rights today. We're going on a journey looking at some truly pivotal, interconnected developments, that often get missed in the whirlwind of daily headlines, but they carry profound implications for all of us. We'll be navigating some major Supreme Court cases, looking into the nuances of executive power, shining a light on, frankly, some serious challenges to public health, and exploring that persistent demand for truth, for accountability, especially when it involves, powerful people and institutions. Our mission here, as always, is to distill the key insights from, quite a stack of sources. We want to offer you a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed, maybe with some surprising facts, and just enough, hopefully, thought-provoking analysis to keep you hooked.
And what's particularly compelling, I think, in our sources today is how these seemingly separate issues, you look at voting rights, the stability of legal precedents, those intricate challenges facing public health, even the pursuit of transparency in cases like, the Epstein case, they're actually deeply interconnected. They really form threads in this much larger, still unfolding tapestry of power and justice in our society. Our core goal for this deep dive is to help you understand not just what is happening right now in these critical areas, but really why these developments matter and what the broader implications might be for everyone. So whether you're prepping for a meeting or just trying to catch up on what's going on, or maybe you're just driven by, a deep curiosity, we're here to help you connect these dots, to illuminate the forces at play in our democratic system.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting with a topic that truly lies, right at the very heart of American democracy. The Voting Rights Act. This isn't just some dusty piece of legislation. It's long been seen as a fundamental safeguard, for free and fair elections in this country. And right now, it's under intense scrutiny again. This act, you have to remember, was born out of profound struggle. It was a direct response to a really painful time in American history. Back in 1965, just months after civil rights marchers faced those brutal attacks on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, Congress passed the VRA. It was specifically designed to combat the insidious tactics states, especially in the South, had historically used to suppress the black vote. We're talking about things like poll taxes, deliberately confusing literacy tests, designed to be failed, and those notoriously gerrymandered redistricting maps that strategically split communities just to dilute their voting power. The VRA was really meant to counter these systemic barriers, to finally make good on the promise of the 15th Amendment, the right to vote regardless of race.
And originally, the VRA had these two particularly powerful sections, sort of the heavy hitters, designed to achieve those goals. First, there was Section 5. This acted as a pre-clearance mechanism. What that meant was certain places identified by a formula as having a history of discriminatory voting practices, they had to get federal approval before they could make any changes to their voting laws. We're talking approval from the U.S. Department of Justice or a special federal court panel.
Before they could change anything, like polling places or...
Exactly. Polling place locations, voter ID rules, redrawing electoral maps, all of it needed pre-approval. It was meant to be a proactive check, a critical safeguard to stop new discriminatory practices before they even started.
Okay. And the other section?
That was Section 2. Section 2 is broader. It prohibits any voting practice or law that results in discrimination based on race, color, or membership in a language minority group. Now, unlike Section 5, Section 2 is more remedial. It lets individuals or groups challenge discriminatory voting laws in court after they've been enacted. The argument is that the law has a discriminatory effect, even if it doesn't explicitly say something discriminatory. It was meant to be this permanent, overarching safeguard against, voter dilution and suppression.
Right. So Section 5 was the proactive check, Section 2 the reactive challenge.
Precisely. But here's where the story takes a really critical turn, one that dramatically changed the VRA's future. Just over a decade ago, in a really big decision, the Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice Roberts, effectively dismantled Section 5.
That was the Shelby County case, right?
That's the one, Shelby County v. Holder. The ruling invalidated the formula, the mechanism used to figure out which states and localities were subject to Section 5's pre-clearance rules. Without the formula, Section 5 basically became inoperable. Roberts' argument, his rationale, was that the conditions that necessitated Section 5 back in 1965 had, quote, improved.
Improved how?
Well, he argued that using a decades-old formula for this kind of federal oversight wasn't constitutionally justified anymore by current conditions. He pointed to various societal changes, notably the election of Barack Obama, as sort of proof of progress.
Okay.
But this decision fundamentally weakened the VRA, leaving only Section 2 as the primary federal shield against racial discrimination in voting. And many legal scholars, civil rights advocates, they were really concerned at the time. They warned this would open the door to new kinds of voter suppression.
And have we seen that?
Well, many would argue yes. Subsequent years have unfortunately seen a rise in measures that critics say disproportionately affect minority voters.
Okay, so Section 5 is effectively gone. And now you're saying Section 2 is what? Hanging by a thread?
That's how many observers see it, yes. The Supreme Court recently heard a profoundly important case coming out of Louisiana.
Louisiana. Okay, what are the facts there?
The facts lay out a pretty stark disparity. Roughly 1/3 of Louisiana's population is black.
Okay, about 33%.
Right. But only one of their 7 congressional districts currently has a black majority. Just 1 out of 7.
So black voters are about a third of the population, but only have a majority in about 14% of the districts.
Exactly. So activists advocating for fair representation, they aren't asking for, disproportionate power or anything. They're simply arguing for the creation of one more black majority district.
Bringing the total to 2 out of 7.
Correct. Which they argue would provide more equitable representation closer to reflecting the state's actual demographics.
Makes sense on the surface, but the Supreme Court, what's their angle here?
Well, this is where it gets really intricate and, for a lot of people, deeply concerning. The Supreme Court isn't just looking at the specific facts of the Louisiana case. They are also questioning the very legality, the constitutionality, of drawing what are known as minority-majority districts at all.
Wait, hang on. They're questioning the legality of the tool used to enforce the Voting Rights Act?
That's essentially the question being raised.
Yeah.
Is the practice of designing districts specifically to protect or enhance minority voting power, which has been a central mechanism for enforcing the VRA for decades, could that practice itself be considered an unconstitutional racial classification?
That sounds paradoxical, like saying airbags violate car safety laws.
It's a challenging concept, definitely. It fundamentally questions decades of established civil rights law and the common understanding of how Section 2 is supposed to fix vote dilution. It raises this significant legal paradox. Is the remedy designed to fix past discrimination now potentially being viewed as a form of discrimination itself? And for many legal experts, if the court were to adopt this kind of reinterpretation, it would mark a massive shift in how race and representation are viewed in electoral politics by the highest court.
So what are the stakes if Section 2 gets weakened or, reinterpreted this way?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of American elections, the implications are potentially huge. Legal experts are sounding alarms, really urgent warnings. They're saying that if Section 2 is further undermined, or maybe even interpreted in a way that makes these kinds of challenges much harder to win, it could lead to the redrawing of as many as 11 congressional seats across the country.
11 seats? Where?
Many are in electorally key states. Think Texas, Georgia, North Carolina, places where minority voters often play a really decisive role in outcomes. The potential result, according to these experts, is that these district changes could effectively strip black and brown voters of significant political power.
Changing election outcomes before anyone even votes.
Potentially, yes, affecting the 2026 cycle and beyond. And this isn't just about which party wins or loses. It hits at the fundamental right of citizens to have their voices heard, their communities genuinely represented. It's about how the very structure of our representative government could be reshaped.
That is sobering. Okay, let's shift focus slightly, but stay on this theme of rights under scrutiny. Another cornerstone of civil rights, same-sex marriage. Is Obergefell in danger?
It's a question that's unexpectedly resurfaced, yeah. You probably remember the controversy around Kim Davis, the Kentucky county clerk.
Oh yeah, back in 2015, refused to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples, citing religious freedom. Big story.
Right. Well, her case, or at least legal questions stemming from it, have kind of re-entered the legal conversation recently. And it's not just revisiting old news. Some legal analysts are suggesting this could potentially be an avenue for the Supreme Court to reconsider, maybe even overturn, Obergefell v. Hodges.
The landmark 2015 ruling that legalized same-sex marriage nationwide.
Exactly. Now, Davis lost in the lower courts. She still faces financial penalties for her actions back then. But her legal team is still pushing forward. They're arguing her religious freedom was violated, sure, but more significantly, they are directly arguing that Obergefell itself was wrongly decided and should be overturned.
Has the Supreme Court agreed to hear that argument?
Not formally, no. They haven't decided to take the case for a full review, but, and this is important, they have asked for more briefings on specific legal points related to it.
What does that mean, asking for more briefing?
Well, it's not nothing. Legal observers often see it as a kind of smoke signal. It suggests that at least some of the justices are seriously considering the underlying questions. They might be looking for an opportunity to revisit the precedent.
So is there actually a chance Obergefell could be overturned? What's the judicial math look like?
Well, it raises a real question about the stability of established rights. If you look at the current court, Justices Alito and Thomas have already gone on record in previous opinions saying they believe Obergefell was wrongly decided.
Okay, that's 2 votes.
Then you consider the judicial philosophies of Justices Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Gorsuch. They're generally seen as originalists or textualists. It's theoretically possible they could align against the Obergefell precedent. That would make 5.
A majority.
Potentially. However, many legal observers also think that Chief Justice Roberts, even though he dissented in Obergefell back in 2015, might be hesitant to actually join a majority to overturn it now.
Why, if he disagreed with it then?
The thinking is the potential political fallout would be just enormous. Overturning a right relied upon by millions, leading to widespread public backlash, significant instability for families. Roberts is often seen as mindful of the court's legitimacy and stability. So it's not a foregone conclusion, but the potential pathway is clearer than it once was.
Okay, but didn't Congress do something about this recently, the Respect for Marriage Act?
Yes, that's the good news, or at least a significant counterpoint. In 2022, Congress passed the Respect for Marriage Act. This is a federal law, and it mandates that all states must recognize same-sex marriages that were performed legally in other states.
So even if a state tried to ban new same-sex marriages,
Which would almost certainly face immediate legal challenges anyway.
right, they couldn't invalidate marriages that already happened legally somewhere else.
Exactly. The federal act prevents states from invalidating existing legal marriages performed elsewhere. So for people already married, it offers a crucial layer of federal protection. States can't, unmarry you.
Okay, that's a relief for many, I imagine.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But still, despite that legislative safeguard, the fact remains that a fundamental right, one that millions of Americans rely on for their legal standing, their families, their identities. It's once again potentially up for debate by the nation's highest court. It really underscores the need for constant vigilance to protect established civil rights, and it highlights this ongoing tension between what the courts decide and what Congress legislates.
Okay, let's shift gears now. Let's talk money and power, specifically the intersection of economic policy and executive power. There was this really unexpected comment recently from Treasury Secretary Scott Bend.
Ah, yes, the comment about the tariffs.
Exactly. He was on Fox Business talking about former President Trump's tariffs, and he said, and I'm quoting here, "The more money that comes in, the harder it is for the Supreme Court to rule against us."
Which definitely raised some eyebrows.
Raise eyebrow. I mean, excuse me, courts are supposed to rule on the law, right? On the Constitution, not on how much revenue an executive action brings in.
That's the fundamental principle, yes.
That sounds like banana republic logic. It feels like a complete subversion of constitutional government, the separation of powers.
Well, what's thought-provoking there is the implication about judicial independence. This suggestion, even if unintentional, that financial outcomes or revenue streams should somehow influence legal interpretation is a real challenge to the foundation of our legal system.
It feels like saying, we made so much money breaking the law, you can't possibly stop us now.
It raises that critical question. If the Supreme Court were ever to let cash flow or the economic impact of a policy shape its constitutional interpretations, well, then you're eroding the rule of law itself.
It's game over for the rule of law, basically.
It suggests power or the fiscal results of an action, rather than legal principles and constitutional limits, could become the deciding factor. That would fundamentally alter the balance of power.
And what was the legal basis for these tariffs in the first place? It wasn't just a standard tax, was it?
No. Former President Trump used the Emergency Powers Act, specifically Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. This allows the president to put tariffs on imports if the Commerce Department finds those imports threaten national security.
National security, for things like steel and aluminum from allies.
Well, that's exactly the point critics made. They argued the broad application of these tariffs, covering so many goods and countries, went way beyond the original intent of the act, which was more narrowly focused on protecting specific defense-related industries.
So these were supposed to be temporary measures?
Initially framed that way, yes. Temporary trade measures to fix imbalances.
Mm-hmm.
But they ended up generating significant revenue, billions of dollars. Some observers started calling it a kind of slush fund, revenue outside the normal congressional budget process.
And is the legality still being challenged?
Yes, the legality is currently under review in lower courts. Challengers are arguing it was an overreach of executive authority. So Secretary Bent's comment lands right in the middle of that ongoing legal and constitutional debate, adding a pretty contentious layer.
Okay. Let's move to another legal battle, maybe less noticed, but still significant. Mississippi's new social media law.
Yes, the Walker-Montgomery Online Safety Act.
Right. What does it do exactly?
It bans kids under 18 from using certain social media platforms, think Instagram, Facebook, unless they have explicit parental consent.
And there are penalties.
Potentially significant ones. Fines up to $10,000 for violators, presumably the platforms.
Okay, on the surface, the intent sounds noble, right? Protect the children online. We hear that a lot.
That's certainly the stated rationale, and it resonates with many parents' concerns.
But here's the rub, as they say. It might be unconstitutional.
That's the core tension, exactly. The First Amendment protects freedom of speech and access to information. And crucially, it doesn't just protect adults. Minors have First Amendment rights too, although with some limitations.
So who challenged it?
NetChoice, a tech industry group that represents many of these platforms, sued the state of Mississippi. Their central argument is precisely that. This law infringes on the First Amendment rights of young people to access information and express themselves online.
And what did the Supreme Court do?
Well, importantly, SCOTUS refused to block the law while the case plays out in the lower courts.
So the law is in effect right now in Mississippi.
Yes. That procedural decision means the law remains active as the legal challenge works its way through the judicial system. The Supreme Court hasn't made a final ruling on whether it's constitutional or not yet.
But wasn't there something else, a comment from one of the justices?
Yes, and this is quite insightful. Justice Kavanaugh wrote a separate statement about the court's decision not to block the law immediately. He actually said he thinks the law probably is unconstitutional on First Amendment grounds.
He thinks it is unconstitutional, but he voted not to block it.
Correct. His reasoning was procedural. He said the plaintiffs, NetChoice, didn't show enough harm to justify an emergency block at that specific early stage of the lawsuit. So it suggests he sees the potential constitutional problem, but felt it wasn't urgent enough to stop the law immediately before the lower courts could fully examine it.
Interesting nuance. So this whole situation leaves us with some big questions, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It throws us right into this fascinating, really complex, broader debate that goes way beyond Mississippi. Can states legally restrict access to digital platforms just based on age? Who gets to decide what's safe online for kids?
Yeah.
And could those definitions become, political tools?
And the big one. How do we balance protecting kids online, which everyone agrees is important, with the fundamental right to free speech and access to information for everyone, including teenagers?
Exactly. This Mississippi law and the court case around it is really a significant test case. It's forcing the courts to grapple with how these traditional rights apply in our rapidly evolving digital world where technology often moves faster than lawmaking.
Okay, let's shift now to something heavy. A really serious and frankly disturbingly underreported incident that feels symbolic of bigger challenges.
I think I know where you're going, the CDC incident.
Yeah. I want to describe this because it's shocking. A man shows up outside the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta. He has a semi-automatic weapon. He unloads over 200 rounds of ammunition. 200 rounds. He kills a police officer, tragically, and leaves the nation's leading public health facility riddled with bullet holes.
A direct attack on a crucial federal institution.
Exactly. And yet, the silence was astonishing, wasn't it? Many people didn't even hear about it for days. There wasn't wall-to-wall media coverage like you might expect for an attack on, say, the Capitol or another federal building. No major presidential statement mourning the officer or condemning the attack on the institution itself.
The relative quiet was noticeable.
And for many observers, that silence, that lack of prominent public discussion, it sends a really concerning message. It sort of suggests that our public health infrastructure, which has already been under siege, let's be honest, from years of political attacks, conspiracy theories, outright lies, maybe isn't being defended as robustly as it should be.
And this happens in a context where the leadership at the top of the health apparatus is controversial, to say the least.
Right. The head of Health and Human Services, HHS, the agency overseeing the CDC, is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, his career, his public profile has been largely built on, tearing down scientific consensus, especially around vaccines. He's compared vaccine researchers to Nazi collaborators. He insists COVID vaccines are dangerous despite, mountains of evidence to the contrary.
His stance is well documented and directly contradicts the views of the vast majority of the scientific and medical community.
And then there was the kicker. Right before the shooting happened, Kennedy announced that HHS was pulling funding $500 million worth for mRNA vaccine research.
A huge sum targeting a specific groundbreaking technology.
$500 million for mRNA research. We're talking about the most revolutionary vaccine technology we've ever developed. The technology that gave us a shot against COVID in record time. The technology that holds incredible promise for fighting cancers, HIV, the next pandemic. And we're pulling the plug.
Or at least significantly reducing investment.
Why? What was the rationale?
The stated rationale, as reported from within the administration, was essentially because his political base doesn't trust it, responding to public trust concerns.
Wait. Because some people don't trust the science, we defund the science. That's like saying people don't trust seatbelts, so let's rip them out of all the cars. It sounds like madness.
It certainly sparked intense debate about whether policy decisions regarding scientific research should be driven by public opinion polling or by scientific merit and potential.
And can you draw a line from that kind of rhetoric, that defunding, to the violence?
Well, direct causal links are always complex to prove definitively. However, many public health experts and analysts argue that you can see a relationship. When leaders repeatedly attack scientific institutions, spread misinformation, and question the motives of scientists, it can create an environment where some individuals feel justified, maybe even emboldened, to take extreme actions against those institutions.
So it's not just speculating to say that the rhetoric might have played a role.
Experts argue it contributes to a climate of hostility and distrust that can have real-world consequences, including threats and violence against public health officials and facilities. It's not about blaming one specific speech for one specific action, but about the cumulative effect of undermining trust in science and government institutions.
And this isn't just bad policy then, it feels like. Sabotage. When the government itself restricts access to proven vaccines, shuts down promising research, even for people who want the protection.
That's a strong word, sabotage, but it reflects the deep concern some critics have. They see it as undermining the government's fundamental responsibility to protect public health, weakening our defenses against known and future threats.
And are we seeing real-world consequences already, beyond the attack itself?
There are worrying signs, yes. Cracks are appearing. For instance, in Texas, there are measles outbreaks spreading. Measles.
A disease we eliminated in the U.S. back in 2000.
Exactly. Eliminated thanks to highly effective vaccination programs. Now it's reemerging. And tragically, in these recent Texas outbreaks, 2 unvaccinated children have already died.
Oh my God.
Pediatricians are now facing outbreaks of a disease many of them never thought they'd encounter in their U.S. careers.
And it could get worse.
Public health experts warn that's the risk. If overall vaccination rates continue to drop, we could see the return of other terrible previously controlled diseases, meningitis, diphtheria, even polio.
This isn't alarmism. This is just math.
This is epidemiology. This is science. When a community loses herd immunity because vaccination rates fall below a certain threshold, infectious diseases can spread rapidly. And kids, the most vulnerable, often pay the highest price. Period.
And Congress, where are they in all this? They confirmed Kennedy.
That's a crucial point. If we connect this to governmental oversight, the silence from Congress is, well, quite noticeable to many observers. Kennedy was confirmed, based on assurances, promises really, that he would listen to the experts, especially on vaccines.
A promise critics say he clearly broke.
That's the argument, yes. His actions and public statements since confirmation seem to directly contradict those assurances. Yet, Congress, the body with oversight responsibility, hasn't held formal hearings on this, hasn't issued a strong, formal rebuke.
What message does that send? To the public, but also to the people working inside these agencies?
That's the concern.
Yeah.
What does it signal to the thousands of dedicated scientists, doctors, the everyday workers inside places like the CDC? These are people who work tirelessly, often behind the scenes, to keep the nation safe. Think about the humor cost. During that CDC shooting, accounts emerged of staff and even preschoolers and infants in the CDC daycare trapped on lockdown until late at night.
Unbelievable.
These aren't just faceless federal employees. There are fellow citizens doing vital work, and the attack on their workplace needs to be seen for what it was.
Which was?
Domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
Just like the Oklahoma City bombing, just like January 6th. An attack on a symbol of American government and its function.
And the fact that it was downplayed, barely covered.
That only makes it worse, many argue. It minimizes the threat and fails to adequately support those public servants who were targeted.
Let's circle back to the mRNA funding cut. Why is that specific technology so important?
Because mRNA isn't just about COVID. Many scientists believe it's the future of vaccine development and potentially much more.
How does it work? Why is it revolutionary?
It allows scientists to essentially program genetic code. They can take the genetic sequence of a pathogen, a virus, bacteria, design a vaccine based on that code, and develop it incredibly rapidly.
That's how the COVID vaccines came so fast.
Exactly. That capability is seen as absolutely crucial for tackling the next pandemic, whatever it might be. Cutting funding for mRNA research, from this perspective, is like unilateral disarmament in the face of future biological threats.
And it's not just pandemics, right? You mentioned cancer.
Yes, the potential applications are enormous and go far beyond infectious diseases. Researchers are actively using mRNA platforms to develop personalized cancer vaccines, therapies for HIV, treatments for rare genetic disorders, maybe even tackling heart disease.
We're really on the cusp of breakthroughs.
Many believe we are. Breakthroughs that could save millions of lives. To pull back funding now, especially based on politics or ideology rather than scientific promise, feels incredibly short-sighted to many in the research community.
So what's the path forward here? What needs to happen?
While many are calling for Congress to step up, hold hearings, demand accountability from HHS leadership, there's a growing call for RFK Jr. to either resign or be removed if he continues down this path.
And for the public?
Ultimately, it might be on us, the public, to push back harder, to stand up for science, to demand that our leaders defend the people and institutions that keep us safe, and to call out misinformation consistently every time we see it.
Because this isn't partisan.
Absolutely not. Public health isn't a partisan issue. Viruses don't care how you vote. Science, truth, and strong reality-based leadership are the only way we win against these threats.
Okay. Now, listening to all this, the court battles, the attacks on institutions, you might be feeling a bit overwhelmed or maybe cynical. We get this question a lot. Why does any of this matter? Why bother with all these lawsuits against Trump and his administration if the Supreme Court is just going to side with him anyway?
It's an understandable feeling, that sense of maybe inevitability at the highest level.
Right. I get it. I really do. It can feel like the deck is stacked. But here's the thing, and it's really crucial. What happens in the lower courts actually matters. A lot. In fact, most of the wins and losses that actually impact our day-to-day lives, that shift policy on the grain, happens long before anything even gets near the Supreme Court.
Yeah, you really need to understand the structure of the legal system here. Think of it like a funnel.
A funnel?
Yeah. The wide bottom is the trial courts, federal district courts. Tens of thousands of cases get filed there every year. That's where the action is, overwhelmingly. As the funnel narrows, fewer cases get appealed to the circuit courts. Even fewer make it to the highest level of appeal within those circuits. And by the time you get to the very top, the tiny opening that's the Supreme Court, they only hear about, 60 or 70 argued cases a year?
Yeah.
Maybe a few dozen more summary decisions out of those initial tens of thousands.
So most cases never even get close to the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when people focus only on SCOTUS, they miss the vast majority of the legal landscape where things are actually decided. And here's what's really notable. Public interest groups, state attorneys general, they're filing these challenges in the lower courts. And according to legal tracking groups and analyses, they're winning a lot.
How often?
Some analyses suggest a success rate around 90% of the time in these kinds of challenges against recent executive actions deemed unlawful. That's not me making up a number. That's the track record being reported.
90%. That's huge.
It is. And these wins, even if they don't make the front page of the New York Times, have real impact. They force administrations to back down on policies. They release billions, literally billions of dollars in funding for education, healthcare, democracy programs that were being illegally withheld. They stop unlawful takeovers, like the attempt on the D.C. police. They block unconstitutional executive orders.
So these aren't just symbolic wins.
Not at all. They add up to massive real-world impact, happening constantly just below the radar of the biggest headlines.
Okay, give us an example, a real-world case study.
All right, let's look at the National Endowment for Democracy, the NED.
Right, the group that promotes democracy and human rights abroad.
Exactly. Well, not long ago, a federal judge in D.C., Judge Shabney Friedrich, issued a preliminary injunction against the Trump administration regarding NED funding.
And Judge Friedrich was a Trump appointee, wasn't she?
She was. which makes her ruling against the administration's actions even more noteworthy. So the NED gets funded by Congress every year, hundreds of millions, to support democratic institutions globally. It's about diplomacy, values, not just, wheeling and dealing.
But the Trump administration wasn't keen on that kind of program.
Reports indicate they generally weren't. They often de-emphasized traditional foreign aid, hollowed out parts of the State Department, and in this case, Trump's Treasury Department started slow-walking the money Congress had already appropriated for NED.
Just not releasing the funds.
Exactly. Stalling, month after month, effectively trying to choke the program by withholding its legally allocated funds.
So NED sued.
They did. And Judge Friedrich reviewed the case and ruled pretty clearly. The administration's stalling was illegal. The executive branch can't just refuse to release money Congress has lawfully directed. She issued an injunction forcing them to release the money.
And did the administration fight it? Appeal?
Nope. They didn't even appeal. They caved. Released $95 million almost immediately. That's a win. A real, tangible win in a lower court that kept a vital program running.
Okay, that's a clear one. What else? You mentioned healthcare funding.
Right, the UCLA case. This one also didn't get huge national press, but the implications were massive. The Trump administration tried to yank over $400 million in science and health research funding from UCLA.
$400 million? What kind of research are we talking about?
We're not talking about abstract stuff here. This money-funded cancer research, infectious disease studies, pediatric programs, healthcare initiatives for the homeless population, even cutting-edge projects like mobile stroke units that save lives in real time out in the community. Life and death, boots on the ground kind of work.
And a judge stepped in.
Yes, a federal judge in Northern California issued a preliminary injunction, basically saying you can't just cut this funding without justification. The administration then tried to get cute, saying they weren't terminating the funding, just suspending it indefinitely.
The old semantic trick.
The judge saw right through it. By August 12th, the judge ordered the money restored immediately, told the administration they couldn't withhold funds based on vague political gripes. They needed specific, lawful reasons if they wanted to target programs.
And what was the gripe? Why target UCLA's health research?
Reports strongly suggest the real reason was political retaliation. It stemmed from how the administration perceived UCLA's handling of campus protests, especially pro-Palestinian demonstrations.
Wow. So punishing a university's vital research funding because you don't like protests happening on campus.
That's how many interpreted it. And that sets a really chilling precedent, doesn't it? Yeah. Weaponizing government funding against free expression on campus. That's incredibly dangerous for academic freedom.
Absolutely. And $400 million. That's a huge amount, even for a big university like UCLA.
It is. And it wasn't just one big pot of money. That $400 million was estimated to support around 800 individual research programs.
800 programs.
Yeah. While UCLA has a large budget overall, many specific research projects rely on these dedicated funding streams. Pulling that rug out could collapse an entire pediatric research effort, shut down a vital community health program, and a promising cancer trial prematurely. The impact directly affects the development of treatments for cancer, Alzheimer's, infectious diseases, things that affect millions of us.
So the court stopping that was critical.
Absolutely critical. And what's fascinating here is seeing the courts function exactly as intended in the separation of powers doctrine as a check on potential executive overreach, preventing potentially authoritarian tactics. If that kind of political pressure using funding as a weapon against institutions based on speech went unchecked, it would lead to chaos, harm research, and fundamentally damage the relationship between government and public institutions like universities. The courts really were the bulwark there.
Okay, one more example. You mentioned the D.C. police.
Right, another story that didn't get much splashy coverage but really deserves attention. The Trump administration tried to essentially take over the Washington, D.C. Police Department, federalize it, install their own hand-picked acting police commissioner.
Just take control of the city's police force.
That was the attempt. Override the local mayor and police chief, put the federal government in direct command.
How did that play out in court?
Very quickly. It went before a federal judge, Judge Reyes. After a hearing that reportedly lasted just over an hour, the judge basically told the administration's lawyers, "You're going to lose. The law is clear."
What law?
The D.C. Home Rule Act, plus Congress's ultimate authority over the district. The administration simply didn't have the legal power to do what it was trying to do.
So what happened?
The administration folded. They surrendered before Judge Reyes even issued a formal written order. The D.C. police went right back under the authority of the mayor and the police chief, where they belong according to law. Another clear win for the rule of law, decided quickly in a lower court.
So, looking at these cases together, there was a strategy here from the resistance side, wasn't there?
Absolutely. When Trump took office, he used that shock and awe strategy. Hundreds of executive orders, rapid policy shifts, trying to overwhelm the system. But the resistance was strategic too. State attorneys general stepped up, I think it was 23 of them, working together, coordinating lawsuits. And groups like the ACLU, the Brennan Center, Democracy Forward, they didn't run away from the fire. They ran right into it, filing challenges across the country.
And the impact if they hadn't done that?
Well, connect the dots. Without these legal challenges, you'd see real projects around the world shutting down, less support for human rights activists, more room for authoritarian leaders. Domestically, you'd see potentially billions less for healthcare, education, science. You might have seen federal control over local police forces. The cumulative impact of not challenging these actions would have been immense, directly harming public health, scientific progress, and democratic norms.
So the big picture here.
The point is, most cases never get to the Supreme Court. The point is that we are winning right now consistently in the lower courts.
And these wins aren't small.
Not at all. These victories are releasing billions in funding, they're protecting democratic institutions, safeguarding science, and forcing administrations time and again to back down when they overstep their legal authority. That's the reality happening below the Supreme Court headlines.
All right, let's shift gears one last time to a story that's controversial, messy, and frankly infuriating for so many people, and it just won't go away.
The Epstein saga.
Yeah. Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein, and the mountain of files that powerful people seem very keen on keeping buried.
It's a story that seems to touch on deep networks of power and abuse.
Absolutely. And it's clear Epstein and Maxwell weren't just acting alone. They were reportedly at the center of this sprawling network of abuse that allegedly reached into the highest levels of society, politics, finance, even royalty.
And the struggle, years later, to get the full truth speaks volumes.
It really does. And now, the latest twist. Ghislaine Maxwell, convicted on multiple counts of sex trafficking minors, she's now eligible for work release.
Meaning she could soon be leaving prison during the day to participate in community programs.
For victims, for advocates, this feels like, well, yet another slap in the face. Maxwell wasn't just some passive bystander. She was convicted of being an active recruiter, a groomer, one of the masterminds.
The idea of community participation strikes many as jarring, given the nature of her crimes. It fuels suspicion of a quiet rehabilitation campaign.
And you really cannot talk about Maxwell and Epstein without talking about the political weight behind their story. And yes, inevitably, Donald Trump's name comes up again and again.
There have been numerous reports and documented connections over the years.
And reports also indicate that the Trump administration specifically went out of its way to stall, block, and bury documents related to Epstein.
We've heard about hundreds of gigabytes of files potentially locked away.
Files that could tell us exactly which powerful names were involved, who visited Epstein's properties, what really happened. There was talk of 2 tractor trailers full of material seized from Epstein's properties.
And this is despite promises of transparency.
Exactly. Trump himself promised total transparency, said no stone would be unturned. But critics argue what we've seen instead looks much more like a cover-up. The full picture remains hidden.
And then there was the leak about that secret meeting.
Right. A leak about a private meeting inside Trump's circle, specifically about the Epstein problem.
Where was it held? What were the details?
Originally planned for J.D. Vance's house, apparently, but then moved to Washington near the White House, supposedly for more secrecy.
And who was there?
Reports suggest Trump insiders, high-level DOJ people, Trump's chief of staff, maybe Stephen Miller, maybe even Trump himself briefly. The attendee list is still debated. But the disturbing thing was the topic of the meeting, according to the leaks. It wasn't about justice for victims or getting to the truth.
It was about
how to manage communications, how to spin the Epstein story so the public doesn't keep demanding answers, how to handle the narrative.
That's deeply concerning if true. Managing communications instead of addressing potential crimes.
It's not just shady. It feels dangerous. This isn't a communications problem. It's a crime problem. It's potentially a cover-up problem. It's like holding a meeting after the Lincoln assassination to discuss how to spin Ford's theater security protocols instead of catching the killer.
In amidst all this spin and obfuscation, there was a significant pushback from the judiciary.
Yes. Judge Paul Engelmayer. Tell us about that.
What's fascinating here is Judge Engelmayer issued this really powerful 38-page order that basically says what so many people have been screaming for years: release the damn files. His order made 3 really critical points to cut through the noise.
Okay, what were they?
First, he reminded everyone very clearly that Maxwell is no innocent victim. She was convicted of heinous sex trafficking crimes. He put the victims, over 1,000 women and girls reportedly connected to this, back at the center. He underscored the gravity.
Good. What else?
Second, and this was huge, he set the record straight about where the files are. There was this spin trying to blame the courts for holding things up. Engelmayer explicitly stated, the motherlode of Epstein files is in the possession of the Trump administration. Not the judges, not some mysterious archives. The administration itself holds the keys.
So directing the pressure where it belongs.
Precisely. And third, he kind of debunked the idea that the grand jury transcripts were the big treasure trove everyone was waiting for. He noted those sessions were often short, with limited evidence or victim testimony presented. So the bottom line for Engelmayer's order was crystal clear. The real evidence, the comprehensive files, are still locked up under the control of Trump's people. And until those are released, we don't have the full picture.
And how did Trump's circle react to the leak about the meeting and Engelmayer's order? J.D. Vance went on TV, right?
Yeah, Vance tried to do some damage control on Maria Bartiromo's show. He admitted a meeting happened, but he tried to downplay it, said the location and timing details in the leak were wrong, denied Epstein was discussed, denied it was secret.
How did that go over?
Terribly. Nobody seemed to buy it. By confirming a meeting happened, even while disputing the details, he basically validated the core of the leak. He arguably made it worse. It just amplified the calls from everyone left, right, center, demanding the same simple thing: release the files. His attempt to tamp it down just unified the pressure.
And amidst all this political maneuvering, the work release for Maxwell, the spin, where are the victims?
That's the most important question, isn't it? And it's crucial we keep recentering them. Judge Engelmayer reminded us there are over 1,000 victims reportedly connected to Epstein and Maxwell's network. 1,000. Let that number just sink in for a moment.
1,000 lives devastated.
Immensely. Yet instead of prioritizing justice and transparency for them, the focus often seems to drift. We end up debating whether Maxwell gets pottery classes during work release or whether Trump's inner circle can polish their messaging strategy.
It feels grossly unjust.
It feels unacceptable to many. And that's why survivors, advocates, and a growing chorus of the public are demanding full transparency. Release the files. Stop protecting the powerful and connected. Shift the focus from managing optics to achieving actual accountability and justice for those who were so terribly harmed.
Okay, so let's bring all these threads together. Here's the deal, folks. The Supreme Court isn't just some abstract legal body. It's a battlefield, a central arena. And this term, as we've seen, the battles are over fundamental things. Who gets to vote? Who gets to marry whom? Who holds executive power, and what are its limits? What does freedom even mean in the digital age? How do we protect science and public health? And how do we get truth when powerful forces want it buried?
It really highlights the need for constant vigilance. All these seemingly different battles, voting rights, marriage equality, the attacks on the scientific community, the fight for transparency with the Epstein files, they're all connected. They're about power, accountability, and the rule of law.
And the crucial takeaway, maybe the hopeful one, is that the lower courts and sustained public pressure, they play this absolutely vital role, often unseen, often underappreciated, but incredibly impactful in pushing back, in upholding the law.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Well, these aren't just isolated news stories happening somewhere else. They are deeply interconnected threads in this larger ongoing struggle for the core principles of democracy and justice that shape our society. Every quiet victory in a lower court that forces an administration to follow the law, every judge who stands firm against political pressure, every time the truth about something like the Epstein files manages to claw its way towards the surface despite efforts to conceal it. These are powerful reminders not just of the resilience that still exists in our system, but also, frankly, of its fragility. It needs defending. So consider this. If the truth really does have a way of eventually emerging, as we've seen in some of these legal challenges and the persistent push on the Epstein files, what other unspoken truths might still be buried right now, just waiting for public vigilance, for public demand to bring them fully into the light? And maybe the most important question to ponder is, what role do you personally play in that ongoing process of demanding truth and accountability?
That is a powerful thought to leave you with. And it really encourages engagement, doesn't it? We invite you, seriously, talk about these issues, discuss them, share this deep dive if you found it valuable. What do you think Congress should do about the attacks on science and public health? Should RFK Jr. stay or go? And how do we rebuild trust when leaders tear it down? What about the Epstein files? What will it take to get them released? Your voice, your engagement, it really does matter. Hit that like, comment, and subscribe button if you haven't already. It helps others find this information. Thank you for diving deep with us today.